Professor Boisson de Chazourne didn't say a single word about the actual conditions would govern this sovereign right, although we referred to Chile's ambiguity in this respect last week, and we're expecting a reply. Mr. Wordsworth rehearsed the same ambiguity on Monday. Bolivia may dismantle and restore the bofedales, he said. Assuming, of course, and I quote, assuming, of course, Bolivia complies with its international obligations. But Mr. Wordsworth, yet again, did not say what these obligations were. Mrs. Klein-Kleinberg did much the same on Monday. So we'll have to wait until tomorrow's denouement to, we hope, find out more and at last get precise answers to our questions. For its part, Bolivia believes that the court will be in a position to determine that there is no longer a dispute between the parties on the first counterclaim, if, and insofar as, the court can ascertain at the end of the pleadings that Chile does accept the following points. 1. Bolivia has a sovereign right over the drainage installations and the canals. 2. Bolivia has a sovereign right to maintain or dismantle these installations and canals. 3. Bolivia has a sovereign right to restore the wetlands.
Thank you.
And 4. These rights shall be exercised in conformity with applicable customary obligations applicable to significant transboundary damage and applicable only to such harm. It's being understood, however, that
dear Prime Minister De Croo,
and here
Prime
I quote
Minister
Mr.
General Chief of the Defense Staff, dear allies and Romanian soldiers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, mulțumesc tuturor aliaților noștri pentru prezența în România alături de noi. Bine ați venit în țara noastră. Thank you to all our allies for being in Romania with us. Welcome to our country. Prin eforturi comune, contribuim la securitatea spațiului aliat, asigurăm pacea și liniștea cetățenilor noștri. Faptul că ne aflăm împreună în această bază militară reprezintă o dovadă în plus a unității, coeziunii și solidarității care există la nivelul NATO. Through joint efforts, we contribute to the security of the Euro-Atlantic area. We ensure the peace and stability for our citizens. The fact that we are together in this military base is further proof of the unity, cohesion and solidarity that exists in our alliance. Salut prezența astăzi aici a domnului prim-ministru De Croo, cu care ieri am avut consultări politice foarte bune. I welcome the presence of Prime Minister De Croo here today, with whom I had very good political consultations yesterday and this morning. Încă din anul 2014, ca urmare a anexării ilegale a peninsulei Crimea de către Federația Rusă, NATO a început un proces complex de adaptare. Am fost conștienți că ne confruntăm cu un mediu de securitate marcat de noi riscuri și amenințări și de conduita tot mai agresivă a Federației Ruse în plan regional. Astfel, a apărut postura de descurajare și apărare a NATO pe flancul estic. As early as 2014, following the illegal annexation of the Crimean Peninsula by the Russian Federation, NATO began a complex process of adaptation. We were aware that we were facing a security environment marked by new risks and threats,
In the second part of my presentation, I will turn to Bolivia's second and third counterclaims,
as a consequence,
also referred to as counterclaims B and C, in order to demonstrate that Chile accepts all the propositions on which counterclaim 2 is based, and that counterclaim 3 follows logically from points that Chile has also accepted, and that both counterclaims are therefore fully justified. Now, in taking up these matters, I wish to assure the Court that I will endeavor to focus on the issues that continue to divide the parties at this stage of the proceedings.
And the Euro-Atlantic security,
so let me turn directly to Chile's submission D, according to which Chile requests the Court to declare that Bolivia has an obligation to take all appropriate measures to prevent and control pollution and other forms of harm to Chile resulting from its activities in the vicinity of the Salar. On this point, I can be very brief, although perhaps not quite as brief as Chile, which despite 2 rounds of oral argument on its claims, has not said anything to justify its submission D. Now, that's really quite extraordinary when you consider that Chile is the applicant in this case. I noted last week that there's no legal dispute between the parties regarding the subject matter of submission D. Bolivia is on record as saying that it takes pollution very seriously, and Bolivia has never caused any pollution or any other form of harm to Chile. And for its part, Chile has not disputed this, either before these proceedings were instituted or during these proceedings, nor has Chile ever claimed that Bolivia somehow failed to take appropriate measures to control pollutions or other forms of harm.
In addition,
there is simply no dispute over the issue. The fact that has been made abundantly clear by Chile's failure to make the slightest mention or the slightest attempt to defend its submission D in 2 rounds of oral argument on its claims. In short, Madam President, distinguished judges, submission D is without object. Chile has not demonstrated otherwise, and Bolivia submits, therefore, that the submission D should be summarily rejected. Submission E, on the other hand, was addressed by Professor Bosson de Chazon on Monday. However, as I shall show, Council's arguments did nothing to establish that this submission, pursuant to which Chile asserts that Bolivia has breached its obligation to notify and consult, has any merit either.
NATO has stepped up measures to prepare the allied military
To start with, it's useful to take note of a number of factual matters raised last week that Council did not take issue with on Monday. First, in its short-lived 2000 concession, the Bolivian company DUK never implemented any plans to use the waters of the Salar. It only tried to invoice the FCAB company and other Chilean companies for their uses of the water. There was thus no duty to notify or consult with Chile because there were no planned measures to actually use the waters.
You are standing here shoulder to shoulder.
Any ideas to build a small weir or a water bottling plant never got off the ground, and the fish farm, as Chile acknowledged last week, was abandoned. And by 2014, as I said, the matter was a non-issue. Indeed, Chile did not raise the matter again and did not allege any breach of an obligation to notify or consult until it introduced this case. The matter was essentially moot. Third,
După cum am decis la recentul summit de la Bruxelles, vom accelera transformarea alianței pentru a consolida postura de descurajare și apărare a NATO pe termen lung, în special pe flancul estic și la Marea Neagră. We will continue our efforts to ensure a prompt, determined and robust response from NATO to any challenge or threat. As we decided at the recent summit in Brussels,
until
will
Chile
accelerate
started
the
this
alliance
case.
transformation to strengthen NATO's
Finally,
long-term
as we've
deterrence
said,
and
there's
defense
never been any
posture,
pollution or any other
especially
form
on
of
the
harm to
eastern
Chile's
flank
use of
and
the
the Black
waters,
Sea.
let alone
Acționăm
significant
pentru
harm, and
operaționalizarea
Chile
cât
has
mai
never
rapidă a
claimed
celor
the
4
contrary.
noi grupuri de luptă, dintre care
Now, despite
unul va
all
fi
this,
în
Professor
România.
Boisson de Chazorn argued
Acesta va
on Monday
contribui,
that
alături de
these
celelalte
facts cannot
structuri
be
aliate,
used
la
by
întărirea
Bolivia as a
securității pe
loophole
întregul flanc
to
estic,
justify
în mod coerent
its
și unitar,
so-called
fiind un
non-respect for
prim
the
pas
obligation to
spre echilibrarea
notify
prezenței
and
aliate
consult
pe
or to
flanc.
modify the
We are
content
working to make
of
the
that
4 new
obligation.
battle groups operational
And to support
as
this line of
soon as
argument,
possible,
Council
one of
primarily
which
relied
will
on
be
Article
placed
11
in
of the
Romania.
Watercourses
It will
Convention,
contribute,
to which
together with the
neither
other allied
Bolivia
structures,
nor
to
Chile are
strengthening the
parties,
security on the
and
entire
which does
eastern
not
flank
reflect
in a
customary international
coherent
law
and
on the
unitary
matter.
manner as a first step towards
Council
strengthening
even
the allied
accused Chile of
presence
refusing
on
to
the flank.
communicate with Chile concerning its
militari
activities in
aliați,
breach of its obligations, but I've
prezența
shown that this is
dumneavoastră în
plainly
România are,
false with
dincolo
respect
de
to the
componenta
activities
de
that actually got
securitate,
off the
și o
drawing board, the
dimensiune
10 small houses in the
simbolică.
military
Împreună cu
post.
colegii
And I
voștri,
took the court
militarii
to the
români,
relevant correspondence on
protejați
this
și
last week,
apărați
and I will not
valorile
repeat that
euroatlantice
again.
care definesc în mod esențial
As one
societățile
highly
noastre.
respected commentator on the
Democrația,
Watercourses Convention has
drepturile
observed,
omului,
Article
statul de
11
drept
of the
și
Watercourses
dreptul
Convention is a
fiecărui popor de a-și
highly
decide
general provision,
propria
a
soartă.
chapeau to what follows.
Dear allied soldiers, your presence in
Unlike
Romania
Article
has,
12,
beyond
which refers
the
to
security
planned measures which may have
component,
a
symbolic
significant
dimension.
adverse effect.
Together with
The
your
International
colleagues,
Law
the
Commission's
Romanian
commentary on
soldiers,
Article
you
11
protect
does not
and
cite
defend
state
the
practice
Euro-Atlantic
or
values
judicial
that
authority for the
fundamentally
proposition
define
that any
our
planned
societies.
measure is
Democracy,
subject to an obligation
human rights,
to exchange
the rule of law,
information and
and
to
the right
consult,
of each
no matter
nation
how
to
insignificant
decide
that activity
its
is.
own fate.
And for
Numai
her part,
împreună
Council
putem
on
asigura
Monday did not
securitatea
cite
și
any state
bunăstarea
practice or
cetățenilor
opinio
noștri.
juris
Vă doresc succes
to support
în
the contention
activitățile
that
de
Article
pregătire
11
pe care le
reflects
veți întreprinde,
customary international
precum
law.
și în
And
misiunile
that's not
în care
surprising, I would
veți
suggest.
fi angajați. Vă mulțumesc.
Under Council's
Only
thesis,
together
any state
can we ensure the
that authorizes
security and
authorizes the
well-being
building
of our citizens.
of a small
I wish you
house
success in
or
the
a
training
minor
activities
facility
you will undertake,
within 100 or
as well
200
as
meters
in the missions
of an
you
international
will
watercourse
conduct.
would automatically
Thank you
be
all.
under an obligation to exchange information and consult with other watercourse states, no matter how de minimis the activity in question was.
Well,
Now that
Mr.
would
President,
be
Mr. Prime
wholly
Minister, I had some
unreasonable,
hesitation
and it
on who
simply
was
does
following
not
after you,
reflect
Mr. President.
reality.
It seems to be me and the
Chile
Romanian Prime
has
Minister
the burden
will
of
talk
adducing
after me.
sufficient
Excellencies,
state
ladies
practice
and
and
gentlemen.
demonstrating the opinio juris to prove
Almost
that Article
7 weeks
11
ago,
reflects customary international
Europe has
law, but
changed
there's
forever.
clearly
It has
no
changed
settled
forever
practice
for
to
the
this
second
end
time
and
since
no
the Second
evidence
World
that
War.
this practice
The first
is
time,
rendered
it was
obligatory
33
by the
years ago.
existence
It was
of a
in
rule required.
1989 when the Iron Curtain crumbled.
As for
Soviet oppression
judicial
of Central
authority,
and Eastern
regarding
Europe
the
came to an
relevant
end.
principles of
And it is,
customary international law,
people
both
from
Professor
countries
Pelé
like
and
here
I
in
referred
Romania
last
that
week
made a
to the
courageous
court's
choice.
judgment
A
in the
courageous
certain
choice
activities
for
and
freedom
construction
and for
of a
democracy.
road
And they joined
cases,
NATO
where
and
the
they
court
joined
very
the
clearly
European
laid
Union.
out the conditions
As a
for the
result,
obligation
for the first time
to notify
in history,
and consult
the European continent
the conditions
was united,
for the
and united
obligation to
through the
notify
ballot
and
box,
consult
and
to be
not
engaged.
united through gunfire.
I would suggest that the court's decision
As
in those
recent
cases is
as
particularly
7 weeks ago,
opposite, given
this
that it dealt with the
happened
question
again.
of transboundary
Armed aggression
harm
and war
relating
crimes
to a
were
shared
unleashed
freshwater
upon innocent
watercourse.
innocent people of Ukraine, aimed
Yet
at
Council
denying the fact
for Chile
that the
studiously
population
avoided
has a right
even
to choose
mentioning the
for
case.
freedom and has the right to choose
But in
to
the present
be
case,
a
the
proud
conditions that would
and
have triggered an
independent
obligation
country.
to notify and consult
again,
articulated
Russia
by the court
is
in the
trying
certain
to silence
activities
the ballot
and
box
construction of a road
with
case
gunfire.
simply did
And
not
once again,
arise with
this is
respect
a
to
turning
any of
point for Europe,
Bolivia's
for it
activities in
is
the vicinity
a brutal attack
of the
on the
Salala.
core values of
In
Europe.
sum, Chile has simply
Being
failed
it
to come close to
freedom,
sustaining its burden of proof
democracy.
with
These are
respect to its
the core
claim
values
under
that
Submission
underpin the
E,
European Union
and Bolivia
that
submits that
underpin
that
NATO.
claim should be rejected
Freedom
as
democracy,
well. There has
human
been no
rights.
breach of any
This war,
obligation to
let it be
notify
clear,
and consult
it is an
under
assault
customary
on
international law.
everything we stand for. And that is the reason that we as
Madam
countries
President, I now turn to
are
Bolivia's
taking sides in this
counterclaims,
conflict.
starting with the
We
second
are
counterclaim.
with Ukraine.
As I
We are
explained
with
last
Ukrainian
week,
people.
the essence
We are
of this
with the
counterclaim
Ukrainian
is
government
twofold.
and with its
First,
military. And we shall continue
as a
to
consequence of
support
Bolivia's
them
sovereignty
by
over the
imposing
Channel works
a
and
high
its
cost on
entitlement to
Russia,
dismantle those works,
by
Bolivia
isolating
has the
Russia,
sovereign right
by providing
to decide
military support
whether the
to
enhanced
Ukraine,
or
and by
artificial
giving shelter
surface flow
to
produced by
everyone
those
that has
works
to flee
will be
its country
maintained,
and fleeing the
or
atrocities
whether it will cease
that
to
are
exist
being
because the
conducted
works are
by
removed.
the Russian army.
For example, to protect and restore
President
the weapons.
Putin believed
Now
that he
is
could
what is
control
meant
Ukraine
by the reference
and that
to
he could
Bolivia's
undermine
sovereignty
NATO.
over the enhanced flow.
How wrong
And Chile does
he
not seem to
was.
dispute this.
The activation of the NATO
Professor
response force
McCaffrey's
for the
words
first time
last week,
since its
Bolivia's
creation,
sovereign right
just one day
to decide
after
what
the
to do
invasion
in its
of
own
Ukraine
territory
by Russia,
is, and I quote, a
is a telling
wholly
sign that NATO is more
uncontroversial
united
proposition.
than ever
And that
more
this right
determined
is, again
than
to
ever.
quote Professor McCaffrey,
As allies,
one to which
we are
Chile has
serious
not objected.
about the security of our territory
Second,
and of the territory
given that
of the
Bolivia
allied countries.
has the right
And I have
to
say I
decide
am
whether to dismantle the
proud
infrastructure,
that at
Chile
this
has
base,
no acquired
French and
right to
Belgian
the
troops
enhanced
are
flow
working
produced
side by
by
side
that
to
infrastructure
deter any
indefinitely
aggression
into the
towards
future.
Romania and towards
In other words,
NATO. 2
Chile
weeks ago,
cannot complain
Mr. President, you already mentioned
if the
it,
surface flow,
at the NATO summit in
whatever
Brussels,
its magnitude,
we agreed
is
on the
reduced
establishment of an
once
additional
the channels are
multinational battle
dismantled.
group to support Romania,
Again, Chile
Slovakia,
clearly
Bulgaria,
seems to accept
and
as
Hungary.
much when it stated
All
in its
along
additional
NATO's
pleading
eastern border, troops
that
have
any
been deployed
reduction of the cross-boundary
and
surface
airspace
flow
is being
resulting
policed.
from dismantling the
NATO
channels would not be
is
considered
and will
to be a
remain
violation
a defensive
of customary
alliance.
international law.
We have never sought escalation.
So in the light of those
and we will never
admissions,
do.
one
But let
might
it be
reasonably ask,
extremely clear
is
to
there
President
any real
Putin and
dispute
his
over Bolivia's second
warmongering
counterclaim?
clique.
And in our view, the
NATO
answer is
allies
no.
are ready to stand
However, based on
their
what we
ground.
heard last week,
An
Chile
attack
takes a
on
different
one
position.
of us is an attack
But
on all
it
of
does
us.
so
We are
not
united
by
in defending
contesting
our
Bolivia's
values,
counterclaim
in
as
defending
it stands,
our
but
territory.
rather by
And
attacking
we
a
are
straw man,
extremely
a
united
characterization
in
of the
deterring
counterclaim that bears no
anyone who
relation
is trying to do so.
to what I actually
It
said
is precisely
last week
the mission
in the first
of
round.
the Belgian troops who are stationed here, together with soldiers
Last
from
Wednesday,
Romania, from the United
Professor
States,
McCaffrey
from the
started
Netherlands,
by
from
faithfully
Italy,
quoting
from the United
word
Kingdom, and
for
others.
word
I
how
would like
I
to conclude
described Bolivia's
with some
second
final words
counterclaim in my
to
initial
the Belgian men
presentation.
and women who are here.
And
who
he then
serve more than
stated, and I
2,000
quote,
kilometers away from their
Bolivia's
home
second
and from their
counterclaim
family.
is thus vastly
We are
reduced in
immensely
scope
grateful
and
for
will
your
be
service.
treated
For many
accordingly
people,
here.
these are
In other words, in his
extremely
presentation.
uncertain times.
But
But
then
at a moment
Council
like this,
proceeded to do
It
precisely
is
the
good to
opposite,
know that we can count on
taking
you.
aim at a different set of
professionalism,
propositions
on your
based on
dedication.
selected statements
Your
from
presence
Bolivia's
here
earlier
is
pleadings
valuable
rather than
and
focusing
is
on what
necessary.
was actually said
You are
in
not
Bolivia's
just a
first
symbol of the
round.
solidarity between us.
And this tactic
Your presence
by my
is a very
distinguished
clear
opponent
message to the rest
allowed
of the
him
world.
to paint a kind of
We will
doomsday
defend
scenario.
our freedom. We will
First,
defend
Council asserted that
our
Bolivia
democracy
what
and the free
Bolivia
world,
now
let it be
proposes with
clear,
respect to
will
its
never
second
surrender.
counterclaim amounts to a legal vacuum. Not so, as I will explain. Next, he accused Bolivia of arguing that the Salala is somehow too unique to be governed by customary international law of international watercourses, and that Bolivia has provided no basis for its contention that the enhanced waters flowing through the channels, and I quote, should be exempted from the law of international watercourses. But again, that is not at all what we've said. To the contrary, there is nothing in Bolivia's second counterclaim that is in the least bit contrary to international law.
Nu este doar cartierul general de la Bruxelles,
that Bolivia's argument would result in the fragmentation of the natural unity of a freshwater system, would allow Bolivia to gain ownership of a portion of an international water course by simply developing infrastructure on that water course and would be, and I quote, a dangerous precedent for the governance and management
for its
of
member
international
states.
water courses.
And that NATO is not
All
only
that
in its
sounded pretty alarming,
headquarters in Brussels,
but it bore no
but is
relation
here
to reality
on the ground.
or to the content
Trăim
and
vremuri
justifications for
dificile
Bolivia's counterclaim that I
pe
set
care
out
nu am
last
crezut că le
week.
vom mai trăi în secolul 21.
Madam President, let me
Trebuie să
try
fim
to
pregătiți
dispel the
pentru o
fog
criză
that
de
Chile's first round
durată
arguments
și
have
pentru
attempted
situația în
to
care
create by
această
explaining
criză
as
se va
clearly and
extinde
concisely as
mai
possible the
aproape
legal and
de
factual
granița noastră.
justifications for Bolivia's second
We are
counterclaim.
facing
The matter
difficult
I would
times,
suggest is
times
straightforward,
that
and
we
indeed
never
the
thought we would
propositions
face in
underlying
the
the
21st
counterclaim
century.
have all
And we
been
have to be
acknowledged by
prepared
Chile.
for a long crisis
There are 5
and for
such
the possibility
propositions.
that this crisis extends
Proposition 1.
closer
Man-made
to our
channel works in
border.
Bolivia's territory
Domnule
have
prim-ministru
caused
de
the
Croo,
surface flow that crosses
vă
the border
mulțumesc
to be
pentru
increased
contribuția la
or
decizia
enhanced.
NATO
Both
de
parties
implementare
agree
a
that that is
planului
the
de
case,
răspuns
even though their
gradual.
experts may disagree on
Trebuie
the
să creăm și să
magnitude of that
consolidăm
increase.
o postură de apărare și
enhancement.
descurajare eficientă
Proposition 2.
în flancul de est
Bolivia
al
has
NATO.
the right to dismantle
Mr.
the
Prime
channel
Minister de
if
Croo,
it so chooses.
thank you
This has
for
been
your
repeatedly
contribution to
admitted
the NATO
by Chile.
decision on the activation of the gradual
Proposition 3.
response plan.
If the channels
We
are
need to
removed, the
create and
enhanced flow
consolidate
produced them
an
will no longer
effective defense
exist. Only
and
the natural
deterrent
surface
posture
flow will
in
remain
the
together
eastern
with
flank
the
of
groundwater.
NATO.
Again,
Ne
there's no
bazăm pe
dispute
sprijinul
over that
dumneavoastră
scientifically accepted
pentru noua
fact.
formă a conceptului strategic NATO,
Proposition 4.
care trebuie să
As the
cuprindă
logical
amenințarea
consequence of Bolivia's
Rusiei
right to
sub
dismantle
forma
the
ei reală,
channels, Chile has
care
no
necesită
acquired
întărirea
right to the
prezenței
enhanced
permanente
surface
a
flow
NATO
produced by
în
those
flancul de
channels
est.
indefinitely
We
into the
count
future.
on your
Now
support
that is
for the new
also
form
acknowledged by
of the
Chile.
NATO strategic concept
To recall Professor
that has
Boisson
to
de
stipulate
Chazorn's
the Russian
words from
threat
last
in
week, and
its
I
true
quote,
form
Le Chili n'a
that
jamais
requires the
revendiqué un tel
reinforcement
droit.
of
Chile
NATO
has
permanent
never claimed
presence
such a
in the
right,
eastern
an admission
flank.
she repeated 2 days ago.
Trebuie să luăm în serios apărarea și să o
Proposition 5.
reflectăm în deciziile
Accordingly,
noastre.
any reduction in the surface
să
flow
trecem de la
resulting from the
prezența
removal of the channels
înaintată
by
la
Bolivia would
apărarea
not
înaintată și
constitute a
la
violation of
implementarea
customary
deciziei
international
luate
law.
de liderii noștri
That too was
pe
conceded by
24
Chile in its
martie
additional
la
pleading, to
summitul
which I referred earlier,
extraordinar de la
and it
Bruxelles.
was admitted again by
We need
Professor
to
Boisson de
take
Chazon
defense very
last week.
seriously
And you'll find
and
the
to
reference in the
reflect this
transcript.
in our decisions.
Thus,
It is time to
all
move
of the
from
propositions
forward presence to
underlying
forward
Bolivia's
defense
second
and the
second
implementation
counterclaim
of
have
the
been
decisions
accepted
made
by Chile.
by our leaders on
So I
24th of March
respectfully
in
ask,
Brussels
where
at the
is this
extraordinary
legal
summit.
vacuum
Invazia
claimed by
Rusiei
Professor
în Ucraina
McCaffrey, or the dangerous
este cea mai
precedent? Where is
gravă
that in all of this?
amenințare la adresa
And where is there
securității
any
euroatlantice
attempt
din
by
ultimii
Bolivia
ani.
to exempt the enhanced or
Condamnăm
artificial
ferm
flow
invazia
from
masivă
the
din
law
Ucraina.
of international water
Condamnăm
courses? There
atacurile
is
nemiloase
none.
ale trupelor rusești
plain
asupra
fact
civililor,
is that in the specific
încălcând prevederile
circumstances of this
legilor
case, there
internaționale
is a
și ale
distinction between
umanității și
the
deplângem
natural
pierderile
surface flow
tragice
of the
de
Salala
vieți
in Bolivia's
omenești,
territory and
suferințele
the
umane
enhanced
enorme și
flow.
distrugerile provocate
Bolivia accepts
de
that it
invazia
cannot
ilegală,
arbitrarily and
neprovocată și
unilaterally cut
nejustificată a
off the
Rusiei.
natural flow of the
The
river.
Russian invasion of Ukraine
Although obviously
poses a
Bolivia
gravest
has
threat
a right
to
to an equitable and
Euro-Atlantic
reasonable
security in
share of that
decades.
water.
We condemn
But
in
Bolivia
the
does
strongest
have the
possible
right to
terms
eliminate the
the
enhanced
full-scale
or surface
invasion
flow,
of Ukraine.
which directly
condemn the
stems from its
cruel
right
attacks
to dismantle the
of the
channels
Russian
without
troops
this giving
against
rise to a
civilians,
breach of
contrary
international
to the
law.
provisions of the
Now that clear
international laws
difference
and
has
of
simply been
humanity.
ignored by
And
our
we
colleagues
deplore
on
the
the other side
tragic
of the
loss of
bar.
life, enormous human
And for
suffering
these
and
reasons,
destruction
Madam President and
caused by
distinguished judges,
the illegal,
Bolivia maintains that its second
and
counterclaim is
unjustified
fully
Russian
justified and
invasion.
entirely consistent with
datoria
customary
noastră
international law.
să ajutăm refugiații
And
ucrainieni și
given that
familiile
Chile,
lor
despite
și
its
pe cei
denials,
strămutați.
has accepted
De aceea,
all the grounds
am
on which the
înființat un
second
coridor
counterclaim
umanitar
is based, there
pentru
is
a
no
alina
real dispute over
tragedia
the
prin
issue.
care
The
trec,
counterclaim should be
pentru a le da
accepted in
speranța
our respectful
și pentru a le
submission.
arăta că nu sunt singuri. Suntem alături
That
de
brings me to
Ucraina.
Bolivia's third
It is
counterclaim,
our
and this is
duty
the last
to
part of my
help the Ukrainian
presentation.
refugees,
The third
their
counterclaim
families,
deals with the situation
the
in which
in-country
Bolivia
displaced
decides to
Ukrainians.
dismantle the works,
This is why
and
we
Chile
created the
informs
humanitarian
Bolivia
hub.
that after all it would prefer to have the works maintained because of what Professor Boyle rightly called the benefit that Chile currently enjoys from them, the benefit that Chile enjoys from the fact that the works are in place producing this enhanced flow. And in that case, if Bolivia decides it wants to dismantle, but Chile says, actually, we prefer the status quo because of its benefits, in that case, there would need to be an agreement between the parties as to the terms and conditions under which the infrastructure would be maintained. This would include the compensation to Bolivia for the benefits Chile would obtain for continuing to receive an enhanced surface flow instead of having to tap harder to access groundwater. In taking up the third counterclaim in a bit more detail, I'll respond to the arguments raised by Professor Boyle last Wednesday. My learned friend started on the same foot as Professor McCaffrey. He faithfully quoted the description of this counterclaim that I gave in my first round presentation, but he then embarked on the same tact as his teammate by contesting a caricature of Bolivia's position. Now, Professor Boyle first suggested that the implication of Bolivia's counterclaim is that Bolivia has abandoned any claim to a historic debt.
Forces have been deployed in a collective defense context.
Let me make it perfectly clear that Bolivia does not claim any historic debt in these proceedings. Any claims that exist with respect to the past uses of the waters of the Salala are a matter of private law between the Department of Potosí and the FCAB company and perhaps other Chilean companies for a breach of the terms and conditions on which that original concession over 100 years ago was authorized. Now, Professor Boyle says that Bolivia has now abandoned a claim for an historic debt. The truth of the matter is such a claim never formed part of these proceedings.
Angajamentul nostru pentru a respecta prevederile articolului 5 din Tratatul de la Washington este de neclintit. Suntem uniți pentru a proteja și apăra alianța. Libertatea va învinge opresiunea. Vă mulțumesc.
Bolivia's prior agreement.
And
he went on to assert that the implication for downstream states across the globe accepting Bolivia's counterclaim, and I quote, would surely be worrying and substantial. And he even did Professor McCaffrey one better by exclaiming, and I quote, Bolivia's argument strikes me as the most destabilizing and dangerous that I have ever heard. Those are quite dramatic assertions. But with all respect to learned counsel, they completely miss the mark and have no application to Bolivia's third counterclaim, just as Chile's arguments with respect to the second counterclaim were misdirected. Let me at least try to set the record straight so that hopefully there will be no further misunderstanding of Bolivia's counterclaim. First, if Bolivia decides not to dismantle the channels, in other words, to maintain the status quo, including the increased surface flow that currently exists, Bolivia makes no claim for compensation from Chile. Bolivia will simply be entitled to its own equitable and reasonable use of the waters. On the other hand, and this is my second point, if Chile does exercise its acknowledged sovereign right to dismantle the channels, thus eliminating the enhanced surface flow, the third counterclaim will fall away. In such a case, Professor Boyle acknowledged that counterclaim C will essentially become moot. That's correct. if Bolivia does proceed to dismantle the channels. But my third point is that it is only if Bolivia announces its intention to dismantle the channel and Chile indicates that it would prefer them to remain in place so it can continue to enjoy what Professor Boyle called the benefits from the increased surface flow, that Bolivia's third counterclaim comes into play. The parties would then have to negotiate the conditions pursuant to which Bolivia would maintain the channels. Now, obviously, we've heard Chile's agent and Chile's counsel say during these proceedings that Chile has no objection to the removal of the channels. But why? Why, the court might legitimately ask, did Chile, in its application, threaten Bolivia with provisional measures if Bolivia engaged in any conduct that may have an adverse effect on Chile's current use of the waters, which dismantling the channels most certainly would have had? Why? If this has been their position all along that Bolivia is free to dismantle the channels, why this threat at the very beginning of these proceedings? Now, Ms. Klein-Kranenberg gave no answer to that question other than to try and deflect the point by saying that Chile's application concerned the status of the Salala and related rights, not the existence of the channels. But that, with due respect, scarcely explains Chile's provisional measures threat, which went far beyond that. And moreover, why, if we go back in time, why was Chile so intent with respect to the 2009 draft initial agreement to include a provision that no unilateral conduct would be carried out that could affect the quantity or quality of the existing cross-border flow? That was clearly in contradiction to any notion that Bolivia was free or should have considered itself free to dismantle the channels. Why? We haven't heard those contradictions reconciled by our colleagues. Now, Professor Boyle suggested that Bolivia can't have it both ways. Either the channels must be dismantled or the wetlands restored. You can't have both. But that, too, misses the point of Bolivia's third counterclaim, which refers to the need of an agreement if Chile wants the channels maintained. Now, such an agreement could entail a partial or gradual dismantling of, let's say, the smaller secondary channels first, with its impact on that partial or phased dismantling monitored with respect to the effect on surface flow and the effect on the baselines. And the agreement could be adjusted as appropriate depending on what the situation on the ground, how that evolves. Compensation paid for such partial dismantling could be used by Bolivia towards accelerating the restoration of the wetlands, whether by removing some of the smaller secondary channels and pipes, or bringing in peat from other locations, or rebuilding some of the micro-topography, or by dismantling or eliminating or reducing some of the invasive vegetation you've seen, or other measures. And there could be other detailed arrangements tailored to the facts on the ground as the situation evolves. But the point is, it would be up to Bolivia and Chile to negotiate an agreement that strikes a balance between the restoration of the wetlands and Chile's benefits from increased surface flow produced by the channels. That would be the whole balance that would have to be negotiated. And having made those clarifications, which I thought were apparent from our first round presentations, it should be clear that there's absolutely nothing in Bolivia's third counterclaim that runs remotely counter to international law, the scare tactics of our colleagues on the other side notwithstanding. And this situation bears no relation to Professor Boyle's hypotheses of the Netherlands and Germany paying France for waters delivered via the heavily canalized Rhine, or Egypt paying for a portion of the waters it receives via the Nile, or for India and Bangladesh having to pay for waters which might be said to have enhanced the natural flow from the Hindu Kush. It has nothing to do with those kind of examples. The third counterclaim only says that if Bolivia decides to dismantle the channels and if Chile changes its mind yet again and expresses a desire for the channels and current surface flow to maintain, an agreement is necessary providing inter alia for compensation and the modalities for doing that. Actually, Bolivia's third counterclaim is more akin to a quite different example that Professor Boyle drew attention to last week. That was the example of France receiving by agreement payment from the Netherlands and Germany for providing a service or a benefit to the downstream states by removing chlorides from the Rhine water. In the present case, if Bolivia decides to dismantle the channels and Chile indicates that it would prefer them to remain in place in order to receive the benefits referred to by Professor Boyle, the benefits of the increased surface flow that Chile currently enjoys, an agreement for including compensation for providing such a benefit or service would be entirely appropriate. There's nothing in that that is in the least bit contrary to international law. Madam President, distinguished judges, that's all I need to say about counterclaims 2 and 3. In Bolivia's submission, both counterclaims are entirely justified. Neither of them is contrary to customary international law relating to international watercourses. And for that reason, Bolivia respectfully submits that they should be accepted. I thank the Court for its attention. At this point, Madam President, we're in your hands as to whether it would be appropriate to take a short break before giving the floor to Professor Pillay. Thank you very much.
I thank Mr. Bundy. And before I give the floor to the next speaker, the Court will observe a coffee break of 10 minutes. The sitting is adjourned.
the artificial flow from the channelized springs. This shows that Chile is doubtless more attached to the maintenance of the status quo on the ground than it lets on. Whatever the case may be, shortly before the court was seized, Bolivia proposed that scientific surveys be carried out and I quote, once again, invited the Chilean side to carry out a joint visit to that region. Now, we know the response. It was the filing of the application, even though Bolivia had shown itself perfectly open to pursue both investigation and negotiations. Moreover, the filing did have a positive effect in the sense that Mr. Wheater, the expert appointed by Chile, recognized, at least regarding geology, understanding of the Silala water system has vastly improved thanks to the scientific surveys carried out in the course of these proceedings. Now, if the knowledge of qualified experts was improved, it's logical, I think, that the same would apply to the knowledge of politicians, jurists, and people in the region. These surveys showed that the water oozing from the earth via multiple springs and drained by the 1928 installations made up a genuine international watercourse with all its attendant legal consequences. Now, there remains no dispute about this between the parties and Bolivia, except, of course, that as such, the entirety of customary law applicable to international watercourses also applies to the Silala, including and above all the founding principle of equitable and reasonable utilization. Now, there's no dispute on this point between the parties. Now, as quite rightly Professor Poisson-Chasson maintained, relying on your judgments in the cases of the nuclear test cases, I quote her, the dispute brought before the court must continue to exist at the time when the court makes its decision. That's today, isn't it? So, Madam President, what is important is to ascertain what, at the current state of play, still divides the parties, and to determine that we need to proceed by subtraction. First of all, canvassing the points where the parties agree. Doubtless the simplest way to do this is to distinguish the factual aspects from considerations of a more legal nature. Regarding the facts, Mr. Wordsworth, as of the get-go in these hearings, referring to your judgment in the construction of the Costa Rica case, pointed out, and I quote him, the legal reality is that the areas of disagreement between the experts simply do not matter. End of quotation. Simply do not matter. Now, this assertion is possibly somewhat too categorical, but it does contain a large part of truth. In his intervention on Monday, Mr. Wordsworth kept on. Only two facts appear relevant to him. I'm quoting him again. Fact one. The construction of the channels on Bolivian territory were constructed by FCAB, an English company, pursuant to the 1908 license granted by Bolivia.
Am fost conștienți că ne confruntăm cu un mediu de securitate marcat de noi riscuri și amenințări și de conduita tot mai agresivă a Federației Ruse în plan regional. Astfel, a apărut postura de descurajare și apărare a NATO pe flancul estic. As early as 2014, following the illegal annexation of the Crimean Peninsula by the Russian Federation,
both of these
NATO
facts,
began a complex process
which
of
he
adaptation.
finds so relevant.
We were aware that we were facing a security environment marked by new risks and threats and by the increasingly aggressive behavior of the Russian Federation in the region. As a consequence, we developed a strengthened deterrence and defense posture of the alliance on the eastern flank.
This is not what Bolivia
Agresiunea
itself maintains,
brutală
only reserving the
declanșată de
possibility
Federația
to
Rusă
request
împotriva Ucrainei
reparation
a
to the
afectat însă
FCAB
fundamental
under
securitatea
what has been
regională,
called
europeană, euroatlantică și are proiecții negative la nivel global, mai multe paliere chiar. However, Russia's brutal aggression against Ukraine has fundamentally changed regional, European, and the Euro-Atlantic security and has global negative impact on several layers. De aceea, pentru sprijinirea Ucrainei, greu încercată de această agresiune, NATO și Uniunea Europeană au luat măsuri concrete și consistente. România a acționat la rândul său rapid și eficient, atât la nivel guvernamental, cât și la nivelul societății civile. Therefore, to support Ukraine, which has been hit hard by this aggression, NATO and the European Union have taken concrete and substantial action. Romania also acted quickly and efficiently, both at the governmental level and at the level of the civil society. Am trimis ajutoare umanitare Ucrainei și am primit pe teritoriul nostru toți refugiații care s-au îndreptat către noi, oferindu-le sprijin, cazare și asistență medicală. În plus, am pus în funcțiune pe teritoriul țării noastre un hub logistic care asigură colectarea și transportul donațiilor umanitare internaționale către Ucraina. We sent humanitarian aid to Ukraine and received on our territory all the refugees who came to us, offering them support, accommodation and medical assistance. In addition, we have set up a logistics hub in our country to collect and transport international humanitarian donations to Ukraine. Dincolo de aspectele umanitare, este evident că mediul de securitate internațională a suferit modificări radicale. În consecință, a trebuit să luăm măsuri corespunzătoare de răspuns, strict defensive, menite însă să nu ducă la escaladare. Astfel, NATO a sporit măsurile de pregătire a forțelor militare aliate și de consolidare a posturii aliate pe flancul estic. Beyond humanitarian aspects, it is clear that the international security environment has undergone radical changes. Consequently, we had to take appropriate response measures, strictly defensive and not to escalate. Thus, NATO has stepped up measures to prepare the allied military forces and strengthen NATO's posture on the eastern flank. Dragi militari,
which it purports to encourage, and why Mr.
Wordsworth
persisted in drowning us in technical considerations, which I admit I still don't really understand, which at the end of the day appear legally inconsequential.
și apărarea aliată în regiunea Mării Negre. Mulțumesc, domnule prim-ministru De Croo, pentru contribuția militarilor belgieni aflați pe teritoriul României. Dear soldiers, Romanian and those from other NATO member states, you are standing here shoulder to shoulder, and today you are the concrete expression of our determination to further strengthen NATO's deterrence and defense posture in the Black Sea region. Thank you, Prime Minister De Croo, for the contribution of the Belgian troops in Romania. Vom continua eforturile noastre pentru a asigura răspunsul prompt, hotărât și robust al Alianței Nord-Atlantice la orice provocare sau amenințare posibilă. După cum am decis la recentul summit de la Bruxelles, vom accelera transformarea Alianței pentru a consolida postura de descurajare și apărare a NATO pe termen lung, în special pe flancul estic și la Marea Neagră. We will continue our efforts to ensure a prompt, determined and robust response from NATO to any challenge or threat. As we decided at the recent summit in Brussels, we will accelerate the alliance transformation to strengthen NATO's long-term deterrence and defense posture, especially on the eastern flank and the Black Sea. Acționăm pentru operaționalizarea cât mai rapidă a celor 4 noi grupuri de luptă, dintre care unul va fi în România. Acesta va contribui, alături de celelalte structuri aliate, la întărirea securității pe întregul flanc estic, în mod coerent și unitar, fiind un prim pas spre echilibrarea prezenței aliate pe flanc. We are working to make the 4 new battle groups operational as soon as possible, one of which will be placed in Romania. It will contribute, together with the other allied structures, to strengthening the security on the entire eastern flank in a coherent and unitary manner as a first step towards strengthening the allied presence on the flank. Dragi militari aliați, prezența dumneavoastră în România are, dincolo de componenta de securitate, și o dimensiune simbolică. Împreună cu colegii voștri, militarii români, protejați și apărați valorile euroatlantice care definesc în mod esențial societățile noastre. Democrația, drepturile omului, statul de drept și dreptul fiecărui popor de a-și decide propria the waters of the Silala. Dear allied soldiers, your presence in Romania has, beyond the security component, a symbolic dimension. Together with your colleagues, the Romanian soldiers, you protect and defend the Euro-Atlantic values that fundamentally define our societies. Democracy, human rights, rule of law, and the right of each nation to decide its own fate. Numai împreună putem asigura securitatea și bunăstarea cetățenilor noștri. Vă doresc succes în activitățile de pregătire pe care le veți întreprinde, precum și în misiunile în care veți fi angajați. Vă mulțumesc. Only together can we ensure the security and well-being of our citizens. I wish you success in the training activities you will undertake, as well as in the missions you will conduct. Thank you all.
Turning to those legal questions which allegedly continue to divide the parties, Mr. Wordsworth asserts that there are 2 of them. Let me quote him again. First,
well, Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister, I had some hesitation
in its entirety
who was following
an
after
international
you,
water course subject to the rules of international law,
Romanian Prime Minister will talk after me. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, almost 7 weeks ago, Europe has changed forever.
Entitled
it has changed forever for the second time since the Second World War.
The
first time, it was 33 years ago. It was in 1989 when the Iron Curtain crumbled. Soviet oppression of Central and Eastern Europe came to an end. And it is people from countries like here in Romania that made a courageous choice. Made a courageous choice for freedom and for democracy.
On this last point, in reality, rather than competing submissions, as he described it, it's rather similar submissions that we're talking about, with the important nuance that Bolivia insists that you clarify, distinguished members of the court, in your judgment,
as
that
7 weeks
parties,
ago,
the 2 parties, have right to
again,
this equitable
armed
and
aggression
reasonable
and war
utilization, and
crimes were
not only
unleashed
Chile,
upon
contrary to
innocent
what it petitions
of
in
Ukraine,
its submission small
aimed
b.
at denying
As to
the fact
2 other
that the
questions
population has a
raised
right
by
to choose
Mr. Wordsworth,
for freedom and has
our replies
the right to choose to be
are equally
a
bereft
proud
of
and independent
ambiguity.
country.
Yes.
Once again,
yes, the Silala
Russia
is in its entirety subject to international water class law. In its entirety, Madam President.
This is a turning point
entirety,
for Europe,
of course, includes surface and groundwaters, wherever they come from.
Values
Can we be any clearer?
Being it
this lies most assuredly
democracy.
at the
These
heart
are the core
of Chile's application, and it would be unreasonable to consider that any doubt persists in this respect regarding the parties' agreement. It being clear that, contrary to the vagueness in which Chile indulges, all provisions of the 1997 Convention do not reflect customary rules. And for the second question, Madam President, Chile doesn't have a right, is not entitled to its current usage of the waters of Salada. It only has a right or entitlement while it awaits the dismantling of the installations or for Bolivia to find other uses for the river's waters. These uses must, of course, be consistent with the principle of equitable and reasonable utilization.
President Putin believed
on which Bolivia, like Chile, may avail itself.
And that he could undermine NATO.
The court, that makes a lot of points of convergence, and
the activation of the NATO
response force
lead you to find since its creation,
no need to
just
adjudicate.
one day after the invasion
this solution
of Ukraine
isn't
by
wholly
Russia,
self-evident.
It's a telling sign that NATO is
Chile
more united
continued
than ever
during its
and more
oral pleadings of
determined
Monday
than
to
ever.
maintain ambiguity,
As allies,
not on the
we are
principles
serious
themselves, but
about
on
the
how they
security
should
of
be
our
implemented.
territory and of the territory of the
In
allied
this
countries.
regard, the main question
And I
left
have to say I am
hanging is to
particularly
find
proud
out
that
whether
at this
Chile
base,
is ready
French
to
and Belgian
assume,
troops are working
without
side by side
restriction and
to
without
deter
condition,
any aggression
the
towards
risks
Romania and
resulting
towards NATO.
from a possible
3 weeks ago,
dismantling
Mr. President,
of
you
the
already
installation
mentioned
and channels,
at the NATO
whatever the
summit in
extent
Brussels,
of
we
the
agreed
reduction
on the
of the
establishment
Silala's
of an
surface
additional
water flow.
multinational
Now
battle
we know
group to support Romania,
this
Slovakia,
is subject to
Bulgaria,
very
and Hungary.
divergent assessments
All along
between the two
NATO's
parties'
eastern border,
experts.
troops have been deployed.
It is true
and
that
airspace
Chile
is
made
being
known
policed.
via Mr. Wordsworth
NATO
that in any
is
event,
and will
whatever
remain
the figure
a
of
defensive
surface
alliance.
water loss
We
that
have
might
never
result from the
sought
dismantling of the
escalation,
drainage installations,
and we will never do.
I quote him once
But
again,
let it be extremely clear
one of my
to
favourite
President
authors, as you can see.
Putin and his
Chile,
warmongering clique
time and again, has
NATO allies
emphasised
are ready
that it
to
could not
stand their
complain
ground.
about any drop in water
An attack
flows or
on one of
quality
us is an
caused
attack
by
on
dismantling
all
the
of us.
channels.
We are
End
united
quote.
in defending our values,
However, Madam
defending
President,
our territory. And
we
are
are not
extremely
completely
united
reassured.
in deterring anyone
And it's an
who is
important
trying
subject
to
because
do
it's
so.
of capital
And
importance
it's
for Bolivia.
precisely the mission of the Belgian troops
Doubtless
who are
already
stationed here,
during the first
together
round,
with
Professor
soldiers from
Boisson de
Romania,
Chazorn
from the United States,
categorically
from the
denied
Netherlands, from Italy,
that
from the
Chile
United Kingdom, and
claims
others.
an acquired
I would
right
like
to enjoy
conclude
the additional
with some final
water
words
from the
to the
channels.
Belgian men and women who are here,
And
who serve
Professor
more than
Boyle
2,000
admitted
kilometers
that, I
away
quote
from their
Professor
home
Boyle,
and from their family.
Bolivia, if it
We are
wished,
immensely
could
grateful
eliminate
for
the
your service.
channels and remove the
For many
benefit that
people,
Chile
these are
currently
extremely uncertain
currently
times.
enjoys from them.
But at a
End
moment
quote.
like this, it is good to know that we can count on you, on your professionalism, on your
The
dedication.
speaker repeats the
Your
quotation.
presence here
That
is valuable
appears to
and is
imply
necessary.
that Chile is ready,
You are not just a symbol
or would
of the
be ready
solidarity
to accept
between us.
the dismantling
Your
of the
presence
installations without
is a very
protest,
clear
whatever may
message
be the
to the rest
effect
of the world.
on the volume of
We will
surface water
defend
it receives,
our
and that
freedom.
includes
We
if,
will defend our
and
democracy.
one could never
And the free
write
world,
it off.
let it be clear, will never surrender.
After all, they may be learned but not infallible if Chile's experts who got this wrong.
Domnule prim-ministru De Croo, doamnelor și domnilor, dragi
These
soldați,
admissions
Your
were
Excellency,
disclaimed
Mr.
by Professor
President,
McCaffrey,
Mr. Prime Minister,
whose
ladies and
position
gentlemen,
surely
dear
but
soldiers.
unfortunately more faithfully
Sunt onorat să
reflects
fiu astăzi alături de militarii care dovedesc prin prezența și acțiunile derulate în România că NATO reprezintă cea mai concretă și puternică garanție de securitate pentru statele sale membre și pentru că NATO nu este doar cartierul general de la Bruxelles, ci și aici, în teren.
So once again, is entitled
I'm honored
to its
to be
current
here
use
today
of the
beside
waters of the
the
Sinai
soldiers
River.
that prove through their
That
presence
is
and
a
actions in
quotation.
Romania
And
that
that is
NATO is
submission
not
C
the most
from Chile.
concrete and strong
So,
security
distinguished members of
guarantee
the court, the
for
question
its
is
member
whether
states,
these
and
assurances
that NATO
given
is not
piecemeal
only
by
in
Chile
its
during the war
headquarters in
periods are
Brussels,
sufficiently
but
credible
is
to
here
dispel
on the
Bolivia's
ground.
disquiet. It follows to
Trăim
the
vremuri
court to decide
dificile
this.
pe care nu am crezut că le vom mai trăi în secolul 21. Trebuie să fim pregătiți pentru o criză de durată și pentru situația în care această criză se va extinde mai aproape de granița noastră. We are facing difficult times, times that we never thought we would face in the 21st century, and we have to be prepared for a long crisis and for the possibility that this crisis extends closer to our border. Domnule prim-ministru de Croo, vă mulțumesc pentru contribuția la decizia NATO de implementare a planului de răspuns gradual. Trebuie să creăm și să consolidăm o postură de apărare și descurajare eficientă în flancul de est al NATO. Mr. Prime Minister de Croo, thank you for your contribution to the NATO decision on the activation of the Gradual Response Plan. We need to create and consolidate an effective defense and deterrence posture in the eastern flank of NATO. Ne bazăm pe sprijinul dumneavoastră pentru noua formă a conceptului strategic NATO, care trebuie să cuprindă amenințarea Rusiei sub forma ei reală, care necesită întărirea prezenței permanente a NATO în flancul de est. We count on your support for the new form of the NATO strategic concept that has to stipulate the Russian threat in its true form that requires the reinforcement of NATO permanent presence in the eastern flank. Trebuie să luăm în serios apărarea și să o reflectăm în deciziile noastre. Este timpul să trecem de la prezența înaintată la apărarea înaintată și la implementarea deciziei luate de liderii noștri pe 24 martie la summitul extraordinar de la Bruxelles. We need to take defense very seriously and to reflect this in our decisions. It is time to move from forward presence to forward defense, and the implementation of the decisions made by our leaders on 24th of March in Brussels at the extraordinary summit. Invazia Rusiei în Ucraina este cea mai gravă amenințare la adresa securității euroatlantice din ultimii ani. Condamnăm ferm invazia masivă din Ucraina. Condamnăm atacurile nemiloase ale trupelor rusești asupra civililor, încălcând prevederile legilor internaționale și ale umanității și deplângem pierderile tragice de vieți omenești, suferințele umane enorme și distrugerile provocate de invazia ilegală, neprovocată și nejustificată a Rusiei. The Russian invasion of Ukraine poses a gravest threat to Euro-Atlantic security in decades. We condemn in the strongest possible terms the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. We condemn the cruel attacks
This
of the
submission
Russian
can
troops
only be
against
dismissed purely and
civilians,
simply.
contrary to the
Bolivia's
provisions of
past
the
activities
international
in the
laws
Silala
and
region
of humanity.
are virtually
And
zero.
we deplore the tragic loss
They
of life,
occasioned no
enormous
harm to
human
Chile.
suffering and destruction
And nonetheless,
caused by the
This
illegal,
notwithstanding,
unprovoked
Bolivia
and
exceeded the requirements of
unjustified
international
Russian
law
invasion.
regarding
Este datoria
notification and
noastră
consultation.
să ajutăm
As
refugiații
to
ucraineni
Bolivia's
și familiile lor
counterclaims,
și pe cei strămutați.
well, obviously, we don't
De
have
aceea
a crystal
am
ball
înființat un coridor
to
umanitar
enable divination
pentru a
as
alina
to
tragedia
Chile's
prin
final
care trec,
submissions in their
pentru a
regard.
le da speranța
However,
și pentru a
as
le
will
arăta
be shown
că nu sunt
from the
singuri.
reading which
Suntem
our agent will
alături
give
de
in a few
Ucraina.
minutes, we
It
maintain
is our
them.
duty to help
Changing
the
a
Ukrainian
detail in
refugees,
submission
their
B
families,
and C.
or the in-country displaced Ukrainians. This is why we
Submission
created
A.
the humanitarian hub, to elevate the
This is the
tragedy they
counterclaim.
are going through,
Now,
to give
Chile
them
leaves
hope
us
and
in
to show
some
them
doubt about
that
its
they are not
unconditional
alone.
acceptance of
We
Bolivia's
stand
right in this
for
regard.
Ukraine.
We therefore maintain this
Atât NATO
first
cât și Uniunea
counterclaim
Europeană
as it stands.
sunt solidare cu poporul ucrainean și cu guvernul său.
Counterclaim small b,
Aliații sunt
to
uniți
dispel
pentru a sprijini
any
întru totul
ambiguity, it seems to us
suveranitatea și
necessary
integritatea
to
teritorială a
specify that Chile
Ucrainei
had no
în
acquired
granițele
right
sale
to the current
recunoscute
situation being
internațional.
maintained. As long as it continues,
NATO and
it is
European
clear
Union
that Chile can
stand
continue
in solidarity
to
with the
enjoy
Ukrainian
the
people
water
and
flow
its
resulting
government.
from the installations
Allies
and
are
channels
united
of
in their
Silala
full support
Springs.
for Ukrainian
But
sovereignty
it is not
and
a
territorial
right for the
integrity
future
within its
which would
international
enable Chile
recognized
to
borders.
oppose the dismantling of the
Acțiunile agresive ale
installations,
Rusiei
nor
au
an equitable
determinat
and reasonable
aliații să
utilization of the
activeze
waters of the
planurile NATO
watercourse to which
pentru
Bolivia
apărare
may
pentru
lay
a
claim
proteja
under
alianța.
customary international
In
law.
light of Russia's aggressive actions, all allies
Submission
agreed
C of the
to activate
counterclaims.
NATO's
Once again, we
defense
feel it necessary
plans
to maintain
to
this
shield the
counterclaim.
alliance.
It being understood
SACEUR
that,
a decis să disloce elemente ale
as you can
forțelor
see
NATO de
from this new
răspuns.
drafting,
Este pentru
that this
prima dată când
compensation
aceste forțe au fost dislocate
only would
într-un
concern
context
the
de apărare
future
colectivă.
use of this
SACEUR has
artificial
decided
flow.
to
Were
deploy
the parties
elements
to
of the
conclude
NATO response
an
force.
agreement
This
with
is
a
the first
view
time
to
these forces
maintaining
have been deployed in a collective
said flow,
defense context.
notwithstanding Bolivia's right
Vreau
to
să vă
dismantling.
mulțumesc dumneavoastră,
So,
militarilor
distinguished members of
prezenți
the court,
astăzi împreună
I'd
cu
like to
frații
thank you again
voștri
for your kind
români și
attention, and
tuturor
I request,
trupelor
Madam President, that you
aliate
will
care
give the floor to
demonstrează
Ambassador
cât de
Casadillas
puternică
Sarmiento
este
for a few
solidaritatea
concluding remarks
membrilor
and a
NATO.
reading of the final
I would like to thank you,
submissions
the soldiers
of
who
the
are present
plurinational
today,
state of
together
Bolivia. Thank
with
you.
the Romanian brothers
I thank
and
Professor
all the
Hayyli,
allied
and I shall now
troops
give the floor
who
to the
show
agent of
today
Bolivia, His
how strong
Excellency,
our NATO
Mr. Roberto
members' solidarity
Casadillas
is.
Sarmiento. You have the floor, Your Excellency.
NATO va continua să ia toate măsurile și deciziile necesare pentru asigurarea securității și apărării tuturor aliaților. Angajamentul nostru pentru a respecta prevederile articolului 5 din Tratatul de la Washington este de neclintit. Suntem uniți pentru a proteja și apăra alianța. Libertatea va învinge opresiunea. Vă mulțumesc.
It is an honor to appear before you again as the agent of the plurinational state of Bolivia in order to present the final submissions of my country in the case related to the dispute over the status and use of the waters of the Silala. Bolivia, as a peaceful state, has always respected international law and the borders with neighboring countries, promoting relations of friendship and cooperation. As you have ascertained, during these public hearings, my country's foreign policy values the preservation of the environment and the sustainable use of transboundary water resources in harmony with the human rights to water and the rights of Mother Earth. Within this framework, Bolivia has concluded several agreements on international watercourses with its neighbors through dialogue and negotiation, with the exception of Chile. Madam President, honorable judges, I would like to highlight 4 important aspects referred by Chile last Monday before this court. First, it is not my intention to distract the court with a matter that is not part of this case. However, it is prudent to briefly clarify the context of the conflict over the Lauca River addressed by the agent of Chile last Monday. The Lauca was diverted through artificial canals by Chile from its natural course in 1962 without taking into account the rights and interests of my country or complying with any obligation of international law. It was precisely the breaching of Bolivia's rights by Chile which led to the rupture of diplomatic relations between both countries. Second, based on the statements regarding the preliminary agreement of 2009, Chile seems to intend to free itself from the precedent for what is now considered absurd, that is, to financially compensate Bolivia for the benefit that it received from the infrastructure in Bolivia's territory over which it doesn't have an acquired right. Furthermore, as referred to by Professor Forteau, in June 2008, both states agreed through signed minutes that any future agreement between the parties would include a mechanism to generate benefits for Bolivia. Other similar acts, which were the result of years of negotiation, high-level meetings, joint commissions, and several technical studies, appear in the record of this case. Third, Chile has recognized in the course of its pleadings before this court that the Antofagasta, Chile and Bolivian Railway Company Limited, currently FCAB, has assigned the Silala waters that it captured for free in Bolivia to other uses, commercializing its delivery in Chile and breaching the condition of the concession awarded in 1908 by the prefecture of Potosí. In this context, contrary to what Chile maintains, Bolivia has never abandoned the historical debt. It explicitly reiterates my country's reservation to its rights to clarify before the competent courts any other claim regarding the waters of the Silala, such as the one related to the compensation owed by FCAB company to the Department of Potosí. Fourth, Chile puts great emphasis on the 2019 proposal of agreement, which is a unilateral proposition from Chile with no input from Bolivia. Contrary to what Chile's agent said, the 2019 proposal of agreement was an unnegotiable proposal with no recognition of Bolivia's rights and interests and with 2 months deadline. Having clarified these points, I will now move on to Chile's claim and Bolivia's counterclaims. The proceedings before this court have encouraged Bolivia and Chile to carry out up-to-date scientific studies in their territories. Such studies have led to technical points of agreements that have brought the parties closer regarding the status of the Silala waters as an international watercourse. For Bolivia, these waters of the Silala constitute an international watercourse whose surface flow has been artificially enhanced. Hence, customary international law applies to the Silala, but its application needs to fully take into account the unique factors that characterize the watercourse. This is where the science becomes particularly relevant. Bolivia, as a good neighbor, has always tolerated Chile's use of the enhanced flow generated by the artificial canalization installed in Bolivia's territory, despite the fact that there is no concession or international agreement with Chile that generates any benefit for Bolivia. My country has never limited or restricted Chile's right to use the waters of the Silala in its territory. The flow produced by the canalization continues to drain into the Silala at this right moment, as it did more than a century ago, without any hindrance. Honorable judges of the court, let me highlight it once again so that there is no doubt Bolivia and Chile both have a right to an equitable and reasonable utilization of the Silala. However, Chile does not have an acquired right to the benefits derived from the infrastructure in Bolivia's territory. Additionally, and as it has been proven by Bolivia's counsel this afternoon, Chile failed to demonstrate both in the written phase and in the oral hearings that Bolivia has caused the slightest harm, let alone significant harm, to the waters of the Silala. It follows that Bolivia has always acted within the framework of customary international law and has not breached any international obligations. Likewise, Chile's accusation regarding Bolivia's alleged non-compliance with the obligation to notify or consult on measures that may have a significant adverse effect on the waters of the Silala has not proven either. Let me now move to Bolivia's counterclaims. Chile has acknowledged as a matter of principle that Bolivia has sovereignty over the canalization and drainage mechanism built in its territory, and that it has the right to decide whether to preserve or dismantle said artificial canalization. However, the dispute has not yet concluded between the parties. Contrary to what Chile's claim, it still imposes conditions on Bolivia's right over the channelization. Consequently, the dispute between the parties continues and the court must rule on the matter. Bolivia has been the only country that has carried out, as you have heard, a scientific study on the impact of the canalization on the cross-border flows of the Silala based on actual field work in Bolivia. The scientific experts presented by Bolivia before the court have demonstrated the existence of an enhanced surface flow that currently drains through the artificial canals that cross the border between Bolivia and Chile. On this matter, my country asked the court to declare that Bolivia has sovereignty over the enhanced surface flow of the waters of the Silala produced by the artificial canals and drainage mechanisms installed in its territory, and that Chile does not have any acquired right over said improved surface flow. In any case, if Bolivia decides to dismantle the channel's works, and if Chile expresses its desire to continue enjoying the benefits generated by the current surface flow of the Silala, the parties must negotiate an agreement that includes compensation. In this context, my country asked the court to declare that Bolivia has sovereignty over the artificial canals and drainage mechanism in the Silala that are located in its territory, and has the sovereign right to decide whether and how to maintain or dismantle them, understanding that any, I repeat, any reduction over time of the surface flow of water quality cannot be considered per se as a violation of Bolivia's obligation under international law, as repeatedly acknowledged by Chile in these proceedings. Madam President, distinguished member of the court, I should present Bolivia's final submission in response to Chile's application. Therefore, Bolivia respectfully requests the court to, first, reject all the Chile's submissions. Two, to the extent the court to extent that the court were to consider that there is still a dispute between the parties, to adjudge and declare that A, the waters of the Silala constitute an international water course whose surface flow has been artificially enhanced. B, under the rules of customary international law on the use of international water courses that apply to the Silala, Bolivia and Chile are entitled to an equitable and reasonable utilization of the Silala waters. C, Chile's current use of the waters of the Silala is without prejudice to Bolivia's right to an equitable and reasonable use of these waters. Bolivia and Chile each have an obligation to take all appropriate measures to prevent the causing of significant transboundary harm in the Silala. Bolivia and Chile each have an obligation to cooperate, notify and consult the other state with respect to activities that may have a risk of significant transboundary harm when confirmed by an environmental impact assessment. F, Bolivia has not breached any obligation owed to Chile with respect to the waters of the Silala. Madam President, distinguished members of the Court, I will now present Bolivia's final submissions with respect to its counterclaims. Therefore, Bolivia respectfully requests the Court to adjudge and declare that A, Bolivia has sovereignty over the artificial canals and drainage mechanisms in the Silala that are located in its territory, and it has the right to decide whether and how to maintain them. B, Bolivia has sovereignty over the artificial flow of Silala waters, engineered, enhanced, or produced in its territory, and Chile has no acquired right to that artificial flow. C, any request by Chile made to Bolivia for the delivery of the enhanced flow of the Silala and the conditions and modalities thereof, including the compensation to be paid said delivery, is subject to the conclusion of an agreement with Bolivia. Before concluding, Madam President, judges of the Court, allow me to express my profound gratitude to the Court on behalf of the government of Bolivia for its consideration and attention during these proceedings. I would also thank all the staff of the Court and the interpreters who have allowed our countries to follow the course of the proceedings. In addition, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to the distinguished Bolivian Council, advocates, and the entire Bolivian team that has worked on this important case. Thank you.
I thank Your Excellency. The Court takes note of the final submissions that you have now read on behalf of Bolivia on the claims of Chile and on Bolivia's counterclaims. The Court will meet again on Thursday, 14 April 2022, between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. to hear Chile's reply to Bolivia's counterclaims. The sitting is adjourned.